Let's go, baby. What the funk is back. I don't think I've been behind this microphone in, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks. It's been hectic. The end of summer, the start of school, lots of other commitments. You know the deal. Podcasting sometimes can take a back seat, unfortunately. But fortunately, we're back. We got JB Bendik, the man himself, out of Pittsburgh. We finally got to meet last week on a phone call. Felt a real kinship with JB. I think he knows a little bit about my business. I understand some of his various businesses. So we're going to get into all of that. But JB Bendik coming to us live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. And the question I like to ask all of our guests, JB, is who are you? Who is JB Bendik?
Man, what a great interview question. Thanks so much for, of course, thank you for this time to get with you, and I appreciate your candidness, and I think if I was to spin that first question on who is JB Bendick, I think it more goes towards like my why. It's a lot of people out there like Simon Sinek. I think it's how you say his name, Simon Sinek. He put
Yep.
a lot of stuff on a person's why. And basically, over the course of my life and my career, I've faced a lot of different challenges, and my why has really come down to to find better ways of doing things. And there's no better place right now within the energy, oil and gas, heavy industrial complex, as I always call it, for that. So my why is to further the future, I call future proofing energy and heavy industrials, is to take all of like the heavy technologies that are out there and connect them up to legacy assets and companies, ways and means, and really get them to merge and to adopt so that everyone in the whole ecosystem can truly benefit. And I started doing this years ago in my consulting role, almost about coming up on my seventh year anniversary. And what I've seen, I've been way ahead of the curve on that, driving these conversations ahead of time before they've really started to snowball. And now they've really snowballed and they're coming to fruition. And it's really justified my why as to who I am and who JB is. And so I get excited about new technologies. I get excited about companies that want to improve their ways, that want to be around for another 20 or 30 years. So my why is to connect both those, all those brand new technologies, all those legacy assets, bring them together so that they both can survive and really make the energy and heavy industrial whole complex really work and thrive. So that's my why. Hopefully that kind of gives you a better idea as far as who I am. On the sidelines, I love racing. I love stuff within NASCAR,
Mm.
pretty much stuff within Formula One. I like anything that going off that technology side that it requires absolute precision for execution. Milliseconds count. People say, how can you watch cars going around in circles all the time? And the mechanics behind that are incredible. Same thing with golf. I can always improve my golf game. But the precision on that to take something from 400, 500 yards and put it into the size of a cup that far away and everything that plays into it, oh, golf's not a sport either. I was like, yeah, you try walking 18 holes in 90-degree weather. So I just love the challenges. I love the mechanics of it. But and then also on top of that, on the side, I also do stuff within country music as well. So
Yeah.
uh, I have that little segment as far as me too. So hopefully that gives you a really good explanation. I know that's a long airplane, but hopefully that gives you something to kind of build upon.
Nah, there's a lot for us to dig into there, and I appreciate that insight. You're in Pittsburgh today, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So my I broke out in the energy field about 13 years ago. It all runs together. I have to keep thinking the new calendar years, like how many more years into it.
Yeah.
I got into political science out of college, and I did some banking and heavy investments and mortgage banking and some real Wall Street stuff, and that led into commodities. And I was a commodities broker, and at the
Mm.
time, a lot of people in Western Pennsylvania started coming to town. I always called them the oil boys, looking for energy, and mostly it was driven a lot by Range Resources at the time when Range Resources was very almost like unheard of, and
Yeah.
they really come up here and punching holes and really proved up resources underneath the Marcellus Shell. And I got to have conversations with them. You'd be out in commodities, you're out trying to meet people, you're trying to, get investment money, et cetera. And so, they come to town and I picked their brain because I knew all the financials, I knew the politics, I knew how to run the paper and everything on the background, but I never knew how to dig a hole. And
Yeah.
so I was very curious. I'm always curious. I'm always asking questions. I just absolutely love learning. and got to know him over beer talk. And I'm not trained as an engineer, but I mean I wanted to go dig a hole. Well,
Hmm.
about a year into it, I got to know a lot of the guys. And I got a vouch, and they got me into Halliburton. 5 years after that, I mean, I gave 120 hours a week, everything.
Woo.
At the prime of my life at the time, and ever since then, the last 13 years, it's all been within the energy sector. But that's how I got the break in Pittsburgh, and I got down to Permian as part of reload package within Halliburton. I spent five full years, day in and day out down there, and with family. And I have nephews now, and I have parents. I'm very blessed they're still here, but they're aging, they're getting older,
Yeah.
and so as a result, I need to be more centralized. So I kind of shot call, if you will, from Nashville just because it's central. Because Texas. Speaking of Houston traffic, everyone's like, "Why don't you move to Houston, live there?" I was like, shit. If I did that, I could have one meeting probably a day because I'll be 5 hours in traffic trying to get from one edge to the. I mean, it's almost pointless sometimes. Depending upon where you live in Houston, and then same way in the Permian. If you're out there in the Permian, I'm single, not married, no kids. It's there's nothing there's really bad, not much to do on the weekends, and it takes you a day. You got to hop into Dallas. It's 5 hour drive. I mean, time in my line of work is very, very important, and so I need to find somewhere where I can balance out the needs of my family but also get in tech. So I kind of hub, if you will, in Nashville, and I'm able to then fly to Pittsburgh, for family and shot call and do all my business up there, and then I can also fly, into the Permian or in Houston. It just gives me a lot more access. Plus, it's fun. It's a booming city. Last 5 years on Nashville, man. I'm telling you, when you see that, it, and so let me tell you this: I meet more people from Midland in Nashville than I do randomly in Midland, Texas. Honestly,
Really?
I bumped into people all the time. They're like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm from Midland. You partner where that's at, and I'm like, "Oh boy."
Sure do. Sure do. That's great. And there's huge differences between the Marcellus Shale and the Permian Basin, right? So what a shift for you, right? I heard some political science. You're working at you say Halliburton?
Yeah, yeah. I was with Big
Halliburton.
Red. They're the ones that gave me my break, if you will.
Nice. And you're up in Pittsburgh, you're doing the whole Marcellus thing, finding all kinds of natural gas up in the Appalachia. And then boom, we need you to go to West Texas. We're going to transfer you down there. Talk about some of the differences, whether it be the technical differences, the terrain differences, the cultural differences between the Northeast US, living just outside of Pittsburgh, and then going all the way out to West Texas and Midland. What was that like, both from sort of a cultural and a technical standpoint?
So over the time that I spent in the Permian, one thing that I truly took for granted while up in Pennsylvania were trees and hills.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
now that sounds so okay, a stupid reply, but it's something being up here, born and raised in Western Pennsylvania, you kind of get used to. But I love the thing about Texas. I wanted to get to Texas for the longest time because my lifestyle, the culture, everything with around Texas more aligns than technically Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania politics. See, Pennsylvania in Western PA area kind of aligns more with Ohio, West Virginia, even though it's
agreed.
Pennsylvania. But most of politics within Pennsylvania is driven by Philadelphia and New York and Baltimore. It's kind of like two different cultures, two different states within one.
Yeah,
And so when I got to anywhere in Texas, especially in Midland, I mean, it was kind of like a rite of passage because I think anyone within the oil, truly to be in the oil field, should be exposed to the Permian at some point. And so
agreed.
I was honored to do that. It was definitely culture. I'm gonna say culture shock because of being the outsider. Because when I got down there, it was like 2014, and this is everything was blowing and going. I mean, if you had money, there was work to do. The problem was being an outsider was and I mean it's most respect because I have a lot of Permian friends and contacts and relationships that still there and still call on. So I mean I have to preamble this with I don't mean this in any rude way, but at the time it was very unwelcoming for the outsiders, and that might be due to the number of people like myself that were coming down there and and just hammering. But as you get to know the people there, they always say that they're very well. They are the people. They're good. And don't get me wrong. They're nice, good, hardworking, God fearing, tough. SOBs. But I think coming from outside that nest, the as I call the good old boys club, they don't trust easily to let you in in those circles as far as business.
Hmm.
And I think that comes from previous booms and busts where people come in all the time, drive up their resources, take up all their businesses, and then a bus or something comes, and then they leave. They kind of like pillage it, if you will. And there's been I had a lot of conversations with a lot of these people about this, and they won't come out and say that, but I think they just want to see that that you're serious about the Permian and who they are. But the thing that drove me really crazy was going between the Marcellus. Pennsylvania is also, with the politics of it, has very tight regulatory, procedures. They're in, so it takes a lot longer to get wells permitted if there's certain HSE issues. I mean, to move a bucket of water for you have to have a permit. Now,
Hmm.
compared to what I've seen out West Texas, man, I call it the cowboy way of doing things. That was pretty eye opening. It gave me again more appreciation for the way that Marcellus does, because of the for the landowners in being able to go back and redo well pads. And you don't find, once a well's done, you don't find any poly anywhere. I go to West Texas, I can find poly on the side of a road.
Hmm.
Um, and again, that goes back down to, I think, just the overall the history of it. But here's a connect for you. So the whole founding of oil was up in up side of what is now Oil City or Titusville. That was where the Drake was built.
That's right.
And so people have forgotten that. And I used to break a lot of conversations with this, when they say, "Oh, you don't know anything about oil," and I said, "Well, guess what? Permian won't be here if it wasn't from Pennsylvania." And and how many people, and there are people still in this industry that have no idea where it actually truly started from. And they say, "Oh no, it was it was here in Texas in 19, it was a Spindletop, it was a Santa Ana." And I was like, "No," I said, "that's not where the technical first one was." And I got a lot of credibility from dealing with people that way, and it kind of broke some ice, a lot of conversations, and I think
Hmm.
they appreciated from there. And a lot of the original money came from Pennsylvania. From Pennsylvania as well, for some of the very early fields back in the day. They put the money
Hmm.
into it and stuff of that nature. So, anyways, to land my plane on this one, I would say that the people are very, very welcoming, there, but to see both sides of the regulatory environment, where it's a lot more stricter versus a lot more unrestricted, is very, very interesting. And I think looking forward, on the technology side, I think, especially with, not to spin this on seismic activity and things of that nature that's going on in the Permian, and the amount of water that's going on,
Sure.
I think, and I hate to say this, but I think if the RRC, and if service companies, operators don't unite around in improving their actual resourcefulness, I think that not just the state, the RRC will step in. I think that the actual federal government's going to step in, like USGS. I think if these earthquake activities start kicking up over towards a 5.0, I think the powers of the federal government are going to start kicking in, and that's going to have a major ripple effect on how things are done. And so I don't know how I got on that one, but that's that's one thing that I've seen, as far as difference as far as the regulatory environment, enforceability within Texas and Pennsylvania. And I kind of, my gut saying that that's possibly going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But there's the seismic activities that's been increasing, and now in South
It has
Texas,
been.
and
Yeah.
even Florida, and they have not been, even though they're curtailing inflows on SWDs, and you can finger point on different things and who's to blame and stuff like that. But there's a causality, there's a correlation, and there's a causality. They're curtailing back the injection rates, and it's still going up, 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 up. So something's not adding up. And I think once structural integrity happens, where all of a sudden buildings start falling, or there's a true safety issue to structural, I think the USGS and the feds will step in and override the actual RRC at some point. I would hate to see that happen, and people call me crazy for thinking that, but I think it should be something on someone. I think from a risk standpoint, companies should seriously be considering that, especially if they are truly like ESG.
But then what do they do? Right. So I mean, SWD, for my listeners that aren't familiar, saltwater disposals. You're effectively putting back wastewater into the ground, right? That you're initially pulling out of the ground. What then would operators do that are in the Permian Basin with that water?
It's a huge opportunity. I believe that a lot of the water, and let me give credit, over the past 5 years, a lot of companies have truly stepped up in water management. They put huge recycling facilities together. They're using more, I always say, I call it recycled water. Everyone in the industry says, oh, it's reuse water, frack
So
water, brackish water, whatever name you want.
semantics.
Semantics. They've really put a lot of infrastructure together to capture that back and to treat it and to take out a lot of the solids and to try to use that in their frac jobs instead of using fresh water. So I certainly give them an incredible amount of credibility for doing that, because that it's a very expensive capex. But there's also a lot of hands in the pot, if you will, especially on, and this is no knock on SWDs, but there's a lot of even landowners and operators and service companies. Everyone's got a piece of the pie when it comes to SWDs. And there's a lot of money flowing around on injection, per barrel.
Sure.
And I think the huge, with, again, going back to when I said about Pennsylvania hills and trees and the green grass of it, I think there's a huge opportunity. If there's a way from an economical standpoint to take a lot of that produced water and to actually treat it to the point that it's absolutely, agri grade, if it's down to true potable grade, to literally you could build. And this is a whole nother topic for another day. I'm not going on this little tangent. But if you start, because Texas will have to change on its drug laws and marijuana and things of that nature. But if you took that just from an agri stock grade, and you wanted to run interference against Mexico and with the drugs that are crossing the border and marijuana, all that nature, and you want to get into the medicinal marijuana, there's no better place as far as West Texas, because if you could reuse that water, because you got vast lands that are arid with water. Again, that's a whole another topic. I've raised a lot of eyebrows when I bring that up. But that's something there that you can use for from greening the areas. And I think too, a lot of ranchers, depending upon if they have production on their properties, I think a lot of ranchers are concerned with aquifers too. The amount of fresh water that's being taken out of their resources. There's something I read in New Mexico where one of the aquifers, I haven't followed up on it, I guess went dry somewhere in New Mexico. I don't know if it was in the Delaware portion of it or not, but basically they sucked all the water out of the aquifer, and now they're even worried about a full collapse. I read it a couple weeks ago. I haven't dug into it. I don't know if you're thinking about it or not, but that chatter is getting around. I've talked to a lot of ranchers, and you'd be surprised how many are really truly concerned about the fresh water extraction from a long-term basis.
Oh, I mean, fascinating. Good insights and interesting to think about, because you're talking about an area that's effectively desert, doesn't have a lot of water, yet you're pulling a lot of water out of the ground and then putting it back in. How can that be treated and then reused? Interesting thought process. So when did you leave Midland? What year? You said you got there 2014, and then what happened? You were there for a while. Where'd you end up going? When'd you leave?
Yeah, so timing, at the end of 2019, I decided I needed to get somewhere a little more, central. Well, this is at the end of 2019. We all know how 2020 happened, right?
Oh man.
So my time, my exits at the time, was to at least for the next year or so, because I had a project going on in country music in Nashville. I've always had a place in Nashville. So going back from Midland, on the weekends, things to do, as I said earlier, I was always looking for things to do. So my escape, I would always be going back to Nashville. I have a lot of friends that are producers, music, singers, songwriters, publishers. And so I was always weekending there, if you will, or going back and forth.
Sure.
And so I already had a place in Nashville. And so I just basically, instead of doing day to day, end of 2019, because I had a project coming up that we were pitching to one of the major networks, to hub, at least for the beginning of 2020 there, just because of my time. And I had everything kind of teed up on the consulting side that I didn't need to day to day be in Midland. And so the timing kind of really worked out well, to the point where, I should say, let me backtrack. Unfortunately, 2020 happened I don't want to downplay that in any way, sense, or form. So I hubbed there in 2020. Well, guess what? The whole project, all that, everything shut down, production shut down, touring shut down, and you want to talk about like a double whammy. So all of that, was occurring, and so I basically have hubbed there, in Nashville, since then. And if I need to be back in the Midland or any parts of Texas, like I just said, I fly in. But my full nexus is all in Texas. I just stay at my place in Nashville, and then I fly to Pittsburgh. I'm up here with family. My grandmother's 89. She's got
Hmm.
dementia, and there's some things going on there. I don't mind sharing with the public on that. And so I'm needed more up here, so I have the flexibility, and I'm blessed in that sense that I can basically move where I need to be, whether it's for business, work, or for family. But I keep it between the Tennessee and Texas and Pittsburgh. And so anyone that's out there, what's so funny is I help a lot of companies from that up here that want to break out into the Permian, because I've been through the ringer down there. I help
Huh.
them, and vice versa, because it is two different worlds, but these two plays are critical as far as anything on the energy side. There's no, I mean, I think there's 30 billion cubic feet per day out of the Marcellus. There's 11 to 12 billion cubic feet natural gas, associated gas coming out of the Permian. I mean, that right there is a huge chunk. If there's any type of
Yeah.
cutoff from there, from an energy standpoint, it would wreak havoc on not just the United States, but the whole world. There's just a lot of overlap and similarities. Cimarex, they purchased Cabot. There's now talk with chatter with Southwest, Southwestern, and I forgot.
Chesapeake.
Thank you. Yes, Chesapeake, and then there's one other one that was rumored, Devon and somebody
Devon
else.
and what was it? Devon and Crown Rock or Devon and Marathon. There's a lot of whispers, and I think the big one, obviously, that fell recently with Pioneer and Exxon. Like we're going to see some consolidation, right? And it'll be fascinating to see where this goes. A lot of people have the belief that consolidation is a good thing. I have mixed feelings on it, right? It's always tough to see some of these companies go away and disappear when you develop a relationship and kinship with the people that work at those companies, and then all of a sudden they're going out and trying to find a new job. But it's the nature of this industry. It's a highly acquisitive industry, and it's very finance driven, that you're going to have people looking to reduce cost and consolidate wherever it makes sense. That kind of leads me to another question that I have for you is, where do you see the oil and gas industry heading in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? You mentioned ESG. It's a topic that we can't really get around. I like to refer to it as sustainability, not greenwashing anything, but how can we create an industry that is a more sustainable industry as we look toward moving toward the future without any level of greenwashing to it. But I'm curious, like, what does oil and gas look like in 5 to 10 years? Is it going to be exactly the same as it is today? Are we going to see more companies leading into the CCUS space? Are we going to see more hydrogen? Are we going to see less drilling in the US, more drilling? Just curious, sort of what your view is on it, because I know you're fairly well researched and you've lived this space in different basins. I want JB Bendik's take on where oil and gas is going in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think the next five to 10 years, in a short run, yes, you're going to see some consolidation by the majors. Mainly, the fancy word that they call it is high grading, where they're
Yeah,
looking for tier one acreage. I think, and let me get my words here so I don't get off to too many different technical tangents. I think in the last couple of years, post COVID, when people were coming back, and all of a sudden oil went to negative on paper, and it just
crazy.
caused massive. I mean, people filling bathtubs and pools with oil, and those days. And I thought it was a joke, but I mean, there were some people like asking to dump pools out at the time. I kid you not. Like, I was like, you got to be shitting me on that one. And so what happened is, companies got serious about being profitable, which I've long said I think is important, because a path to profitability is critical, because when you're profitable, you don't need to do as many concessions. You don't have to squeeze the service companies. Service companies don't have to pay cheaper labor, and everyone at the end wins. Both service companies, vendors, and operators, and those that pay, have to have profitability, but profitability should never be greed. And I think when we both get too far apart on greed, that's when things get messy. So I think consolidation is going to happen now, because a lot of egos are hurt after Pioneer. I think in reaction, because a lot of these, and again, this is my opinion. I think a lot of the senior decision makers at some of these operators, that they don't want to lose their grip on their power. I hate to say that they don't want to be acquired. They want to be the acquirer, or they want to position themselves that no one will want to acquire them. So they do financial engineering. They load up on debt
Hmm.
in some way, or they play around with acreage to the point where no one wants to chew on them per se. I,
Hmm.
I I've even gone back on the Oxy back in the day with Anadarko, and I said the reason they play like a poison pill is an illegal term that they use in banking and stuff. But I still think Oxy poison pilled themselves when they did Anadarko because they knew that there was probably sniffing around to be acquired and they didn't want to be acquired. I know it's an
Ah,
unpopular opinion. So
interesting.
they so when they choke on that, you saw look at their stock. I mean, their stock has not done what it's supposed to do. Even Carl Icahn got involved and he kind of backed out a little bit. Now most of the stock is owned by Berkshire Hathaway.
Sure.
Which he's slowly the majority, not the majority owner, but the significant. I think he's above 25% now. I think.
Is he really? Wow.
Yeah, I think he's above 20%. I think he's approaching. I could be again. Please. I mean, don't quote me. I mean, things are always moving. It's somewhere around that. So what's happening is, I think some of these consolidations are going to happen for number one to high grade their tier one inventory to the point that they are able to not have to go out and source. They basically can say, okay, listen, on a PUD development schedule, we know that these resources are here. They're proved up. Now on the back end, our financials look real tight. We don't have to drill. You don't have to produce on them. If we want to do it a much more, continuous acreage, we can do longer laterals. Technology has pushed the longer laterals, up to 2, 3, sometimes even 4 miles long. We don't need as many rigs. We don't need many service companies. We can turn on the taps, within a year or two, by our production schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the consolidation is going to happen in the short term. I think those that don't want to be acquired are going to overpay for some deals that they're going to hate. And again, I put this out there. Look at Chesapeake. Look how long what Chesapeake did. When I broke out in the Marcellus, we did a lot of wells for Chesapeake. I was part of rigs that set records at the time in the Marcellus as far as how fast we were drilling and things of that nature.
Nice.
And then Chesapeake grew, and
sure did.
sacked dead on. And then what? They slowed the window, bankruptcy. They come back out. Now they're selling off assets. And what they're talking about now, they're talking about digesting Southwestern. And you sit there like, dude, haven't you in the last decade learned anything? Like as to as to what? Like and so that chatter on the southwestern side, and if you look at their financials and dig into them, why is that? Is it is it consolidation in the Marcellus? Because there's pipeline constraints. So up in the Marcellus Utica, there's no more pipeline to get to market. So now people are trying to get their resources together so that they can consolidate and get scale to get to market better. No one's really talking about that. That's another story for another day on that one. But I think here's what's going to happen in 2 to 5 years. I think as they start to again, do these acquisitions, the cost of capital is very expensive. There's going to be a huge opportunity in about 2 years for people that are smart now with the higher prices and can build up cash, especially as the market tightens, because there's going to have to be carve outs. I think companies are going to sit down and go, holy moly, we have way too much acreage on here. The lease costs are on these. We're never really going to drill these. And that's when all on the down low, you have a lot of, I call them, I think they're running out of titles, but how companies will go get like a $250 to $1 billion private equity investment and then name their company after an animal. Like, you ever notice that? Like, some animal energy company. I think they've got to be running out of names of the animals. Like, and so you'll see that pop up, and they'll start buying some of these acreage, and they're going to find out is the number one investor or a strong investor in that bigger company is also the private equity arm is the one that has the money to do the carve. It's just so funny how things move, man. It's so connected when you really dig into it and you ask a lot of questions. I think there's gonna be a lot of carve outs, and you're gonna have a company that comes out and then all of a sudden $500 million investor capital, boom, and they get acquired for $3 billion by the company that you technically carved out of. Like you sit there. I mean, so I think short term it's going to be painful in consolidation. Medium term there's going to be carve outs, and then I think whole world production needs oil. I don't buy one bit into less oil down the road. I think we're 1 to 2 million barrels every year on year in world production growth. And I think as the world destabilizes right now, you're seeing Hamas and Israel. You're starting to see Ukraine, China and Taiwan. You're starting to see destabilization across the world. I think people are going to want to start sourcing energy from truly free countries that have more political stability, which is going to be a lot of the U.S., Australia, those neighbors. And I think that hasn't been fully digested yet. And I'm rambling on again, but I think, and time will prove me wrong on this one, because I'm not sure when this is going to air or not. But I think Israel will probably take kinetic action against Iran at some point, and I think they're going to hit some of those oil terminals because the sanctions are not curtailing the black market oil, which is out there that no one wants to talk about, and the black market oil is funding a lot of this geopolitical destabilization.
Mm,
And I think if you kinetically means you have to take like physical action. So if they take kinetic action and they actually attack, not so much the fields because they don't want to destroy the production because the world needs the production. I think it'll be more of like the tankers or the export terminals because it's not a direct attack on actual production facility. If they did that, if someone did that, 120, $140 barrel oil, SPR is drawn down to 270 reserves. People really can't touch that now because they're worried about the salt caverns caving in.
yeah,
It's just, anyways,
yeah.
I've been going on. Sorry about that, Jeremy. And I yap a lot, dude. So please cut me off. And I've had a Celsius this morning or some coffee. So I'm really going, man. So just tap your brakes, JB. Tap your brakes.
No, I like it, man. This is what we do on What the Funk. I wanna get it all. And before we get too far away from it, according to my friend Google, Warren Buffett owns 26.65% of all the outstanding shares in Occidental. I'm not sure how up to date that is, but it's even more than 25%. So you were not that far off. Yeah, I think it is worth talking about with the situation in the Middle East. You know, I'm Jewish, and it's been a very difficult few weeks for me personally, for a lot of friends and family, obviously. And you just hate to see what's going on over there. It's we live in the U.S., which is obviously a generally peaceful place, and the conflict over there is just complete and total opposite. But this is an oil and gas centric podcast, and the geopolitical nature of what's happening there is also something interesting to observe, right? With Iran saying, "Oh yeah, we're involved in this too," and then does Israel take action there? Does the U.S. get involved? What could this do for oil prices? I tend to agree. The lack of stabilization, I'd say, on the geopolitical landscape internationally is something we have to pay attention to. And I would imagine that oil prices will continue to rise as there's a level of uncertainty. You also mentioned the SPR. That's something worth keeping an eye on too. I believe Biden kind of drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You could question whether that was a good decision or not, but nonetheless, there's just not a ton of oil in the reserve right now for us. So we're heading into a very fascinating time within the oil and gas industry landscape. And if you kind of pay attention to the news as well, right? You've got the Toby Rices of the world going out there saying like, let's unleash natural gas, let's unleash LNG. And he probably has a point because there's just such a glut of natural gas here in the US, especially in your neck of the woods where you're literally sitting right now. So how does this all play out? It's going to be something interesting for us to keep an eye on. To pivot a little bit, I see the screen behind you. It says Navitas. I believe that's one of the companies that you own, run, represent. What do you guys do? What is Navitas?
Yeah. So I always say Navitas, the Navitas organization. If you ask
Navitas.
Google, it's Navitas. I call it Navitas. I call it Navitas. I've gone into systems saying like, how do you really pronounce? Because it basically means energy. So it's the energy organization, and that's just my consulting arm that I put out there, and I truly want to hopefully continue to grow it. But in essence, my company, that's the umbrella that I operate underneath for advisory work, and anything that touches in to the future proofing of energy is where we go. I've pivoted a lot over the past. We can relate on being an entrepreneur, really finding the mark and where you fit in the market and what you do. And I get retained, and I go out and I work with two types of companies. I work with companies that have operational challenges within energy and heavy industrials, and they'll
Okay.
bring me on, and I'll go out and I'll assess and I'll do an audit on all their operations, and I'll say, okay, hey, listen, here's an action plan, here's a roadmap of where I think efficiencies can be driven, and here's a step by step. Which one's the low hanging fruit? And if
Yeah.
we kind of nimble that down. Once we do that, then this is where I'm different than all these other consulting companies that are out there. I will then go out to these emerging technologies that solve the problem, because we fix the process first, we identify the problem, and then I will present solutions to the client in that sense so that the
Mm.
choice that they make is theirs. A lot of these consultants out there today, they go out and they bring in all of their solutions, and they throw it down and make them, again, the word where they choke on, they force their companies to kind of choke on and say, this is the best way, there's no other option, you're going to use this one. I like to bring in some options that I know can solve it for them, and let the owners and the key decision makers choose that solution. And that way that
Hmm.
adoption is there. And so you don't have as much churn and burn down the road when all of a sudden you don't have the buy-in because people didn't feel included. And so I do that. And then I also go to these startup companies because I'm so involved in this world as far as startups and high technologies and
Yeah.
advanced technologies, stuff of that nature. I will do some consulting work for them on the go-to-market strategies. And I think that's where we at times overlap too, because you help a lot of these companies go out to market. And the hardest part with that is I have so many conversations, and I've been into this market so long. Sometimes some of these companies on the go to market and on the startup side, they think their solution is the best, and you're like, man, I could tell you some stories where here's what went wrong with these other companies, and but you can't really tell them anything. Unfortunately, you can advise them, and again, I'm about choices, and a lot of the times there's a lot of different pushback in the market on that, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for these companies that are out there to really penetrate these markets. But again, just like operators and service companies, there's a disconnect between these technology companies and these legacy. I call them legacy assets, which means they've been doing it for so long, that they don't bring on any new innovation. And to really spin this whole thing back to the Navitas organization, everyone's talking about AI right now. I was
Oh
talking
yeah.
about that 5 years ago. and and there's the amount of stuff like that I'm right in on, either from certain intel briefs that I get or high level confidential conversations that I have. The plethora of innovation that's about to hit the market over the next couple of years is mind blowing, with what's going to be coming out. I just hope that a lot of people are at least trying to have conversations on saying, okay, are we lean and mean, or do we have the best operations and processes in place, and what's our go forward plan? And a lot of companies, unfortunately, out there do not have a go forward plan. They can't look past the quarter, the next 3 months. Not saying you have to implement it. I just hope that people would say, hey, listen, this is where we are, and here's our quarterly plan, and here's our next 1 to 2 years, and here's our next 5 years, because the pace of innovation is truly amazing what's out there. And I'll defer back to you because you go out and you rep these on within your futures funk futures company. I don't know if you see the same thing. I mean, we could disagree on this, but I don't know if we kind of gel on that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because you're into it more on the day-to-day sell side of it. I started out that way. I kind of got away from it just because of the amount of expectations. For me, it just wasn't manageable, and so I kind of backtracked and pivoted and got into again to the consulting side of it more than the consulting side sell. So I'd love to
Yeah.
get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, Funk Futures at its core, I generally don't pitch Funk Futures too much on this podcast, but nonetheless, I'll jump into it. We do contract sales, fractional interim sales leadership, a little bit of marketing, as well as recruiting, mostly for energy tech companies. When I launched this business about 3 years ago, most of the companies we were working with, I would put in the traditional oil and gas tech ecosystem. We've seen a lot more sustainability tech start to come into the market. The biggest challenge, I think, is just simply the sheer number of solutions that generally to the operator sound the same. Like if I look back on the course of my career, call it almost 16 years now in oil and gas tech, if you just had a piece of technology kind of early on in the shale boom, especially software, you were going to get business because there weren't enough solutions yet in place and it wasn't an overly competitive market. Well, that started to shift really probably 2016, 2017, 2018. You start to see a lot of technologies come out that are pushing production optimization, route by exception, analytics, some of the AI starting to come into the space, some more OCR. And then all of a sudden there becomes this inundation process where you're an operator and you're like, okay, a lot of these things sound similar. Do we already have something that kind of covers this particular workflow, or should we be going out to find it? And it starts to create a situation where I think operators develop a healthy level of skepticism around, man, so many of these solutions sound similar. Like, what makes sense for us to look at? Should we just go to an established vendor and see what they have? Or should we embrace some of these newer technology companies that are coming into the space? So for me, as I talk to new companies that are looking to expand their footprint, primarily in the US, a little bit in Canada as well, with their tech, for me, it's really important to say, okay, what is the market asking for right now? Right. So having a consistent dialogue, not just on the consulting side, but directly with operators, with IT leaders, with operations leaders, with CFOs, right? With CEOs and COOs of small, medium, private, and publicly traded oil and gas companies to understand what are their challenges, because you just can't push solutions on people, right? There has to be some pull coming from the operator as well. My view is that there will be a lot more around the modeling and efficiency and emissions related reduction in the oil and gas space. That's going to come fast and furious, and we'll start to see who the key players are in that universe. I also think from what you said, AI, not just in the back office but also in the field, is going to become something that is really an emerging space in oil and gas, and also just leveraging any level of efficiency and automation that a company can latch onto. We've seen that kind of lead up to this point, but I think the leading operators will be the most tech centric operators. And that's something that will be fascinating for us to play out. The bigger companies obviously have an advantage because of scale. They can reduce their lifting costs. There's a lot of benefit for them, and they can be a little bit more creative as far as solutions that they adopt. But if I'm a really small oil and gas company, if I have a few hundred wells, if I'm in a more obscure basin, maybe somewhere in Michigan or somewhere in South Texas, in California, I would really lean into what can technology do for me? Because as you know, JB, finding resources is difficult right now, whether it's somebody to go out and weld something, to paint something, to go from well to well and just be a lease operator. There are just simply less of those resources now. So then what do? You look for ways to supplement that, to replace that with technology. So I said a lot. It was my turn to kind of word vomit. But nonetheless, I think definitely on the sustainability tech side, on the artificial intelligence side of things, we're going to see companies leveraging data more and more in what should be a really fun time to be in the energy tech world. So that's kind of how I've seen things shift and evolve. But you asked me this question in 2 months, like my answer could be completely different. Right? I mean, that's the pace of technological change, and a commodity driven industry like this. There's an appetite right now for technology. Oil prices drop 30%, that appetite may disappear.
Certainly hit the nail on the head too. Before, again, the massive inflation that happened in the economy, mainly due to a lot of government spending. I used to have a saying that you want to be profitable as an operator around 30 at the time, 35. You want to BE. I'm sorry, not be profitable. You want to BE, break even around $35 a barrel of oil. So at the time, prices were moving back up towards around 70, and I was like, man, if they could really hone in on all that out the door, landed $35, give or take a dollar here, a dollar there, but they're getting around 70, again, a dollar there, a dollar, here or there. That's 100% dollar for dollar. They're again being profitable, because I remember at the beginning of the conversation, sure, I said it's important that everyone be profitable, because profitable means everyone gets paid, and paychecks are people.
Yep.
Now that's really changed. I think the new dynamic is not even 70. I'm thinking 85, 90 is the new 70 range.
Probably.
Even though they say, oh, it's commodities, and go back to my commodity broker days saying, oh, it's a commodity, therefore it doesn't really get into inflation. I was like, well, the constant attack on resources, from across the world, going green and on everything on EVs and, net zero by 2030, 2050, end oil, all that type of stuff. I think a lot of people are not having sober conversations, and I think going back to your point on the ESG or the sustainability and emission side, you're seeing a lot of different companies pop up, in the last couple of years on tracking and recording those emissions, whether it's using drone technologies and LiDAR, whether it's using
Sure.
Sensors, in-field sensors, and it's going in the cloud. And how do you track, measure? Because what's going to happen, I forget the date. I think it's somewhere next year or 2025. They're going to start being fined, because the IRA, the legislation that they passed, if you go past a certain threshold, there's a certain dollar amount that you're going to be paying in fines. And
right.
in order to do that, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to be able to track and record those. Whether it's enforceable or not, that's going to be a whole nother deal. But the way I look at it, the whole sustainability thing, and is the fact that why would you want to, as an operator, Why would you want to be losing your own resources and not capturing it and having that go to market? Why would you want it to bleed off? Why would you, and it's detrimental also to it's not just your resource as an operator. That's the resources that whoever is the leaseholder and the people that have different smaller
Sure.
percentages and division order, analysts. And so pushing it forward, that's being efficient. You want to get every molecule, you want to capture every
That's right.
molecule, not because of the environment, it's because you want to capture every molecule. But we don't talk about that. We do this finger pointing crap, and I don't think it does anything. I think on all sides at the end of the day, need to have a more sober and be more reasonable, with everything. Everyone's a hothead, and even myself, I can be a hotheaded too. But at least I usually I back mine up by data, not by feelings. I always say facts over feelings. I mean, we could all disagree. Everyone can be disagreeable, but we have to be professional in our approach and have sober conversations. But there's so much emotion involved in it these days, and it gets to be cloudy. But the emissions technology is certainly there. That's not going to be going away, and it shouldn't be because of
Yeah.
just the environment. It should be because it's a molecule, it's a resource, and
Yep.
we should be stewards of it. We need to be stewards of the resources that we have. But I think on the AI side, what's going to happen is I always say TID, truth in data, and I think the
Yeah.
AI is going to start revealing a lot of stuff that people, unfortunately, are in denial that they do not want to face. But I also think too the problem with the tracking of emissions is from a liability standpoint, because
Yeah.
now they can go and they can sue. Now there's a claim. Now they can tie it
Yeah.
up in legality, and that's the other problem. Too. Again, there's going to have to be some sober conversations on liability and insurance. It's because there's insurance companies are pulling out now. They're not even underwriting or insuring operators. And well,
Wow.
guess what? Service companies. I mean, that's probably another topic for another day. People can't get into, like, you talk about manpower, logistics, and having drivers. Truck drivers and haulers,
Sure.
because of nuclear verdicts that occurred. Now entrants trying to get in and be their own carrier or part of a carrier cannot get insurance to actually be able to get a truck to be able to fit the need for the services, because we have such nuclear verdicts. And nuclear verdicts are basically where there's something very substantial occurred, whether it's environmental, it could be a unfortunate loss of life,
Yeah.
and not where it's $5 or $10 million to make whole. And I use those words lightly. They're $100 million verdicts. They're ones that, to the point where now insurers are going to say, you know what, we're not going to even insure this. We're not even going to get in this game. And now
Wow.
the banks get into it. Well, if you're not insured, now the banks aren't going to lend. If you ain't going to lend, you ain't going to have your capital. You can't put your capital into grow, and it's a whole
Mm.
cyclical turn. So I think we all need to come to the table, have a sober conversation, realize that the world needs more energy and stable energy. And getting back to what you mentioned too, um, about that is, once we have more stable energy, which means good quality supply, then the whole world benefits. Because uh, what really bugs me at the end of the day, what really drives me on future proofing energy and why I believe in technologies and bringing people together and making the industry better as a whole, is because so many people, and again, I mean this with the utmost respect, so many Americans, especially Americans, have no idea that there's over 1 billion people that still don't have access to clean drinking water or even stable electricity. You know, when you really get outside the bubble that's here, and you start to really look at the whole world, and it's shocking, all because they don't have access to a basic continuous unit of power.
Sure.
Um, we're going to do solar panels and we're going to put out windmills and all that. They don't care. They need it. They need it now. And I just don't think there's any other better place than America, the United States, to do that on LNG, leashing LNG. We need more pipelines. We need to get the market. And we can lead the way. We are with our exports right now. We crossed like 13.2 million barrels. But we'll see what happened. Last time that happened, OPEC turned on the supply. Oil's getting back up there. There's geopolitical destabilization going on. SPR is down. I think OPEC's going to have a move, and I don't think they're going to be. I think they're going to play like they did last time. I don't think it's going to be like 1 million barrels. I think possibly they could turn on the spigot again, if you will, and bring it back up to like 3 million barrels per day. And if it does that, what happens to our here? All of a sudden, we go from $100 barrels back down to 70 or 60, increased costs, and now guess what? That damn cycle over and over and
You
over
got it.
again, and it's just like, ugh. Did
So,
that answer your question, by the way? Sorry.
yeah, no, it's good. It's fun to get in your brain and get some of these questions. Final question I do have for you, and we could talk for hours, but I do have to cut this off at some point. Um, what advice would you give to your younger self, if any? It's a question that I like to ask all of my guests because hindsight is 2020 and it's very clear. But for you, I'm really curious. Like, what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell young JB Bendik in terms of what could make your life a little bit easier as a young man?
For me, it would be to let go more often.
Mm,
So, and by that I mean when I was in school, it took me almost twice. It took me a much longer time to learn. I was put into what they call remedial education classes or special education, whatever name that they give it these days. And so when other people were out playing and running around the yard and things of that nature, I had to study. I had to work at a very young age, 2 to 3 times as harder just to maintain a certain level of grades, if you will. It
sure.
wasn't that I was stupid, and at the time I was I guess you could say bullied, but I wasn't like physically bullied where they're sticking my head into a toilet. There are people that are physically bullied that way.
Sure.
It was more psychological and emotional bullying, and but I was determined to work my way out of the classes, which I did. I worked my way
Hmm.
out of. I graduated, taught my class, went to college. Political science. The whole thing we covered. But at the time, I look back on it, man, and I think I was always set in my mind that if I don't get this grade in A, I'm not going to get there in college. And I was thinking that way like I was in fifth grade,
Mm,
and I wasn't able to let go and enjoy the moment, the time that I was there. So if I look back when as a kid, I would tell myself, to let it go. Like my parents were right. Like, dude, go out and play. This isn't going to kill you. But in my head at the time, I was telling myself, if I don't do this, to me, I'm failing myself because I
yeah.
hold myself to a very high level of discipline and character. And when I fail myself, I beat myself up on it, and I should let myself go a lot better. And I think um, that's looking back is probably what I would have changed. But then on the flip side, I don't think I'd be as critical as I am today in how I think and look at things and how I ask questions and my curiosity because I
Sure.
love to learn. And I think if I wasn't that tough on myself, that I wouldn't want to study. I wouldn't want to look at all sides and why is it that way? Well, how do we make it better? Why do you know the solutions out there? People are like, they always tell me, dude, why don't you just go to work, punch in, punch out, and do your job. I was like, man, I'm not going to be like 90% of the rest of the population. Like, and nothing against that. And that's the entrepreneur in me. But I don't think if I was that tough on myself, I'd be the entrepreneur that I am today.
Probably
Um,
not. Probably not. I mean,
but
I think that is, as an entrepreneur, I can say there's some days where that sounds really nice, right? But I also know I'd find something wrong with that. Like we kind of talked about last week. Like, say I were to just give it all up and go back and get a job. Well, somehow I'd find a way to be frustrated about that too, right? So that's sort of just going to be my nature, and I think that the nature of a hard charger to. Whether you're working full time W-2 for somebody or running your own thing. JB, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate your insights. We kind of met on LinkedIn. You've amassed a good following, and I enjoy your perspective. Where can people find you, whether it be on social media or websites? Like, where can people go and check you out?
yeah, so my website, and hopefully my head looks okay. I played around with the light here. Hopefully it's not been too glaring for you, but it's navitasorg.com, which is navitasorg.com. That is
Sure.
the landing page. I run a good operation. So through there's all the different ways you can come in contact with me, of course, through LinkedIn. And knock on wood, if you message me, as long as it's not like your stupid sells, unsolicited stupid sells, on LinkedIn, make an attempt to be authentic, I will get back to you. I'm very good at it. But just please don't, reach out to me and try to, don't act like you never even looked at my LinkedIn profile or anything of that nature. And I put that out just because I get a lot of solicitations and things of that
It's
nature.
ridiculous, dude. It is absurd the amount of people reaching out to me for stuff. It's like, have you considered outsourcing your software development? I'm like, we're a services company. I don't know, like, where are you getting that I would like do an ounce of research before reaching out? It's crazy.
Yeah, and so again, I just put that out there as an encouragement because then it hurts us too when we have an actual
Right.
possible solution. It falls on deaf ears. But that's how you can reach out to me if you have a legit question and you make an effort, a unique effort, and don't put me into some kind of like automatic trickle down social thing, please. I will definitely get back to you. Um, and I'm pretty quick at that, that way. But yeah, other than that, and you can also engage, on socials, too, like through LinkedIn. Please, I'm always very professional. I might push a lot of buttons because I want to generate conversations and make people think critically. And I can say a lot of things that other people privately message me saying, "Man, I wish I could say that, but I can't because of my job." Or that's one of the rewarding things. Like, man, like, dude. Um, so that's like a humble brag. I engage on socials, on my comments. Just keep it professional. I know I said shit here. I normally don't
You're
do
allowed.
that.
You're allowed to do that. Don't worry about it.
My oil field lingo, man. I just have to flick a switch, go from the field, field talk. I know we got to go. I'll leave with this. So it took me about a couple of weeks. I went from the field into sales because I wanted to learn all the tools,
Sure.
how to do things. And I didn't even realize I was in meetings, and I was like, yeah, you believe that son of a bitch? And I'm like, oh man, I'm like in a meeting with executives, and, and they're like, dude, you come from the field? I was like, yeah, like 3 weeks ago. Oh, we could tell.
That's awesome. Got to check yourself. Well, JB, I appreciate you, my man. This is a lot of fun. Best of luck with all your current and future endeavors. And I have a feeling we'll be having you on here again. But appreciate your insight, my man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening, by the way. I know I yapped a lot, but truly, hopefully I made sense, and hopefully this just does well for you.
Those are the best guests. It's less work for me.
Yeah, like less editing, right?
See ya.
Hey, take care.